Gormil Moigev in clans. 51 years ago, there was a direct assault in this community, and 5 people were deliberately murdered. Deliberately murdered. 3 of them were children. John Dougal, Margaret Gargan, Dee McCafferty, Paddy Butler, and Father Noel Fitzpatrick. It was a deliberate, egregious violation which was accompanied by complete impunity. It was part of a wider policy and can never be seen in a context in isolation of one attack. The previous year, and the Ballymurphy families are here, and they've been vindicated after a lengthy battle. 11 people were killed, including Joan Conley and another priest. In the New Lodge, 6 people were murdered in February 1973, again a direct assault on the community. And the paratroopers that did Ballymurphy went on to do Bloody Sunday. And only there were cameras there and witnessed it, with then Father Daly, who became the Bishop of Derry, waving a white handkerchief. Many of the same stories, the families and survivors and the witnesses are the same. Now, I sat in the court and had the privilege of sitting in the court listening to the impact statements of the Springhill West Rock families. I'm privileged and humbled to get a glimpse into their lives, the short lives that 3 of them lived, and the life of Father Noel and Paddy Butler, and the legacy that they left behind, the trauma, the hurt and the pain, and living with the impunity in their lives for decades. And in 1998 we had an agreement, a political agreement and a settlement to end the conflict. And as part of that settlement and part of that agreement, we had the incorporation into the domestic legislation of the Human Rights Act into the Good Friday Agreement. That provided change and it provided space, but importantly, it provided agency to families. We also had a police ombudsman's office, and the landscape, the criminal justice landscape, began to ease a little. And families seized that. Families like the families in Derry that had an inquiry that emerged out of the agreement, the Ballymurphy families, many more families, and the Springhill families. So there was an opportunity to address an egregious violation, to set the record straight as what happened in Ballymurphy, what happened in Derry, and which has happened in a string of similar cases in which the British state have murdered people. And in the face of looking at the landscape of legacy, and on my last engagement with the police ombudsman, there are 433 cases in that office that have met the grave and exceptional threshold that warrant investigation. Now, that office has been starved of resources and it's been under constant attack from the British government, the NIO, spooks, and the retired special branch officers of the Retired Association that have taken challenges against it. They've tried to kill off that office. The legacy 5-year plan that was put in place was working, and the justice system was working to an extent. Accountability is still a deficit, but it was delivering. It was changing the narrative. There are approximately 1,000 civil cases in the courts, from misfeasance to public office to criminal wrongdoing, from torture, brutality, injury and murder. And the LIB within the PSNI, the body charged, we're looking at the past within that, even though it's not Article 2 compliant, have 900 cases that constitute almost 1,200 deaths. So when the British government are looking at what's happening, when families get a chance and communities get a chance, we have seen the introduction of this bill of shame, and it has been condemned globally. The European Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the independent rapporteurs, all the UN bodies, Irish America, the US Congress, the US Senate. And on Friday, the Law Society here in the North condemned the bill. And yesterday, international lawyers published a report after doing fact-finding visits and tours and talking to families, talking to lawyers and talking to all the stakeholders. They produced a report damning this bill as well. So what is this bill about? This bill is not about reconciliation, although they mischievously use that in its title. This bill is pure and simple, an immunity, amnesty, impunity bill. Nothing more, nothing less. That is it. Don't be fooled. That's precisely what it is. And what it is about is stopping the narrative. the changing narrative and re-correcting the lies that were told 51 years ago, immediately after the murder of these 5 people. That's what it's about. It's about preventing justice. It's about preventing truth. It's about preventing due process. And in the context of evolving and moving forward in a peace process and all the landmark decisions that have been taken that have incrementally moved us forward, we also had the devolution of criminal justice and policing that provided an Attorney General. And Padraig O'Murray, what he was able to do with the support of others and these families was to submit an application to reopen that inquest, to change the official version. Because it is important, folks. If you look at Ballymurphy now as an example, or Bloody Sunday and others, in 100 years' time, the official footnote, the historical narrative, won't be widgery, and it won't be the lies that was told about these families. It'll be what Justice Keegan found and what the Savile Inquiry found. That's what we're about, changing the narrative. And the British state don't like it, and they don't want it, and they're trying to prevent it. Now, we know why they're doing that. We have always known the truth about what they've done, their policy objectives and what their strategies were. And the world knows. But they need to own up to it, and they need to admit it. And now what they're doing is against the grain. Now, we be told all the time there's no resources, we can't investigate that, we can't find soldiers, we can't do this, every excuse in the book. And when they come up with this bill, what do they have? £250 million for whitewash and no money for truth. That's what they're doing. So we need to stand up to it. It's not a full stop. The families won't go away. And Jonathan Kane, Lord Kane of the NIO, a non-elected official, he's the driver behind this bill, but of course he's not on his own. The intelligence services, the spooks, the British establishment, they're the people driving this, and they're the people that want this. And the message he said, and what he admitted, he says the reason why I made amendments to the bill was because the courts were working too expeditiously and too effectively. Now, when we sat in the court and we listened to the impact statements from the families, and it was heartbreaking. It really was, and we got a glimpse into the individual lives, because the people just aren't statistics, as we know. And what Schofield and other judges tried to do, to insulate the worst effects of this bill and to protect the interests of families and justice, was to hear the civilian testimony and the testimony to advance it over a line. And then the British government go and move the goalpost. They change the date. They move it and they say if inquests by May of next year are not completed awaiting a verdict, they'll all be moved out into this new body, the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information. Now, it's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. Like Declan Morgan has taken a position in this, the former Chief Justice, and to credit to him, when he was there, he attempted to move this forward. But importantly, he looked those families in the eye in the hotel that he asked them to go to across from the court. And he stood up and he said to each and every one of them, look at me, trust me, I'm on your side. I am going to stand up and I'm going to ensure you have inquests and that they're completed. And I'm going to work with you. If you put your faith and trust in me, I will make it work. Allow me to do that. And the families did that. And now he's taken a position on this, and he's talking about reconciliation. And he's also talking about imbalance. Well, folks, there is no imbalance. The agreement at Stormont House provided for 4 key mechanisms that addressed all actors to the conflict, all sides, and it was human rights compliant. Now, the British government have never wanted to enter into a process that provides a level playing field and where they will be questioned and information will be recovered. So what are they doing, and what have they been doing over the past 2 decades to thwart and try and hinder and stop justice? Well, they've used secret courts. They've used closed material procedures to go into secret courts, locking out not only families but their lawyers and their barristers. Now, CMPs is a product of the Justice and Security Act of 2012. It was brought in the so-called war on terror to be used in Britain. It's been used in the Belfast High Court more times than anywhere else in these jurisdictions. That gives you a sense of it. They've used public interest immunity and national security clauses. They've said we can't trace soldiers, we can't trace policemen, we can't find documents. But in the course of doing all this and fighting families, they set up what was known as a legacy support unit inside the PSNI. And lo and behold, former special branch officers were assigned to it to determine what judges it would get. And I think all the levels of everything that they've been at, from using all their dirty, deceitful and underhanded tactics to stop families getting truth and justice, they've amalgamated them all into the one bill. And it's this bill of shame. So folks, the message is clear. The bill of shame is not going to be accepted. There's not a political party in these islands, with apart from the Tories. There's not a human rights group in the world. There is no support for it. So we have made a plea, and we're saying to the Irish government, stand up for families. The Good Friday Agreement provided a changed landscape and a level playing field. It provided rights and entitlements. These families don't have to sit and wait on the benevolence of someone to do them a favour. They have rights to find out truth and to get justice and accountability, and yet the British government's shutting it down. So the Irish government have a duty to stand up not only for the rights of citizens in this part of the jurisdiction, but also stand up for an agreement that's been hollowed out by a Tory government. Rights hollowed out, an ombudsman's office undermined, the courts undermined. These families will be unique in any jurisdiction in the democratic world, insofar as if you have had your relative murdered, or you have sustained a serious and egregious violation and injury as a consequence, you will not have any right to remedy whatsoever. Investigations will be shut, courts will be shut, you will have no recourse. That is not acceptable, folks. Not acceptable. So this legislation is not a full stop. The Irish government must step up to the plate. We're also engaging with Irish America, and we're doing all that we can on behalf of families. Relatives for Justice will meet Declan Morgan tomorrow, our board of directors, and they have one message to him. Step back, you've made a mistake, you're out of touch, and you're against the grain. And he's also a man that could not tell the BBC recently when asked, is this bill human rights compliant? I won't answer that. From the senior legal figure that was in this jurisdiction, to not know that or answer that is all revealing. So folks, families aren't giving up. The families won't go away. There'll be legal challenges. Hopefully the Irish government will seek an interim resolution at the European Court, and lawyers and families and NGOs will work collaboratively. We have a meeting hopefully soon with the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar around this, with Amnesty International, the Pat Finucane Centre and the CHA, representing the core issues and the families. So our messages are clear. This isn't over. It's not a full stop. We ain't going away, and we're up for a battle. We prefer we didn't have it. But the one thing I want to say when we're finishing, it is about the traumatic impact, because the denial of justice and what the families have been put through continues a harm. It adds layers of further harm and trauma. And that needs to stop too. And the message to Declan Morgan is, if he continues what he's doing, he's adding to that harm. So I just want to kind of pay tribute to the families, all the families that have been battling. There are agencies in terms of this that will be closed down. Investigations, civil courts, inquests, police ombudsman. It ain't acceptable. We're a society that needs to complete its transition, and part of truth and justice and underpinning the institutions that deliver that is important, not undermining them. This bill undermines them. So Gora Mila Moigav.